Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Just last week I received a small lot of swords, including this one, from an auction I recently participated in. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to show you the process I use when cataloging my swords after I receive them. So this is a topic that, as far as I know, hasn't been treated. At least I haven't seen it on YouTube, and I may have missed something really obvious. So I thought I'd fill that gap. It's a topic that is by no means new. The art, let's say, or science of cataloging collections is obviously a profession too. And it's mentioned in a lot of sword collecting books, for instance. A lot of tips are given there. But usually these are books written pre-internet. So, well, they tend to mention adding your information into little cards hanging from the hilt of your sword, for instance, or these more old school techniques. But today we have spreadsheets, so I thought, why not have a refreshed piece of content to talk about cataloging objects. And this is really important to do, by the way. I know a lot of people for sure don't do it. And especially if you're at the beginning of your collection, you may not think it's necessary. You know what swords you have. They're hanging right in front of the wall in front of you. Or if you tend to have a lot of turnover on your collection, you may think, well, what's the point? I know it's whatever sword it is, and I'm selling it in a week. No need to really collect that data. However, as you move forward and you go through many different swords, your memory does start failing, and having a precise point where you can go to and verify information or check things that you may have forgotten over time, or even to just validate information. You may receive a sword that is weird to your eyes, and you can go and look at measurements and stuff of other swords you previously owned to check if it makes sense. So it's really, really important that you keep this information for yourself, but I also think it's really important that you keep it to be able to share with other collectors. Knowledge about antique swords is abundant. We have a lot of it. There are many books, many websites, many forums, but it's also really scattered, and it can be really hard to research specific details about a sword. So you have to go sifting through forum posts, social media posts, old websites. And if we as collectors get into the habit of having well-curated databases of information, that's all stuff we can eventually share with each other and, spread better and more detailed knowledge about the swords we own. So that's it. I'll start cataloging it, show you step by step the fields I kind of use, how I measure them. There's nothing too crazy about it, but if you've never cataloged your swords, this may be interesting for you. So I'll see you in just a bit. Okay, so as with most projects and most work, the better you're prepared beforehand, the less regrets you'll have down the line. So make sure you follow my tips or adapt to them to your specific needs, and you'll see that this project or this kind of work is going to be a breeze to get through. So what I do usually is gather data and gather it into a spreadsheet, which, by the way, I think I'm going to share in the description of the video so that you can use it as you can download it and use it as a template, adapt it and use it for your own needs. So make sure you check that. But I have all of my information in a spreadsheet divided in columns where I add all of the information for all my swords. I kind of divide this information in three main categories. The first is the hard data of the specific sword. So this is all the quantitative measurements, length, weight, different width, and different kinds of data points that we're going to look at now. The second is historical context information. So this has to do with the model of the sword, where it may have been produced, maker's marks, the unit that would have used it, this kind of stuff. And the third is what I kind of call transactional data. So this has to do with who I bought it from, how much I paid it, and all this kind of more practical information to the purchase. So we'll get started with the first category, so the actual hard data measurement. For this, we're going to need some kind of measuring device. I use this Taylor's tape measure, and that is because it's being flexible, enables me to measure, for example, even the curvature of a saber blade, for example, whereas more rigid measures don't really adapt to that curvature as well. One thing you want to make sure of though, especially when using these cheap tape measures, is that your units are precise. So double check your whatever you're using, inches or centimeters, make sure you double check them with one or two other rulers or measurement units so that you're sure that these are actual centimeters, because lots of times they're not precise. In this case, I've double checked it. These are correct centimeters, so I can trust it quite safely. And then what I try to do is measure everything with the same measuring device. The next thing you're going to need is a weighing scale. I use this simple kitchen weighing scale. Okay, the only thing you want to keep in mind when choosing a weighing scale is one, that it can weigh sufficient, it can withstand sufficient weight. So some swords can get quite heavy. If you have like a heavy cavalry saber with an iron scabbard or something, you can't use a super lightweight scale. So you want something that can hold a few kilos, let's say. This is perfect. The next thing you want is a buffer of some sort. I use this box or some kind of box like this that you can put over the scale. And this is because many times, especially when you have swords with large hilts, so like 3-branch hilts or basket hilts or this kind of stuff, it doesn't fit when you put it on the scale. It'll be hitting your working surface, so you won't be able to measure it precisely. So you want something that keeps it up a little, so you can place it, as in this case, you can see on the scale like this, and swords of any kind will fit without touching anywhere. So that's everything you need as far as measurements go. Well, actually, you may also need a caliper, and this is for smaller measurements. Unfortunately, mine is broken now, so I can't show it to you in this video, but the basic cheap caliper you find in any hardware store for precise measurement, that's going to be very useful, and I suggest you get one. So let's start by measuring the length of the blade. This is obviously a quite crucial measurement that I think anyone knows is needed. What I do is I usually put the 0 down at the ricasso and then just pull to the tip, like you can see here, I hope. It's a bit hard to get on camera, maybe, but yeah, we're there, and we're at about 80.6 centimeters. So that is the data point that gets entered into the spreadsheet. I then measure the full blade, which is the same process. So I put the 0 down at the end of the pommel nut here, and then measure up to the tip, which in this case, let's see if I can get it on camera, is 92.5. This can get a little bit tricky sometimes, because with bigger hilts, basket hilts or like 3-branch hilts, those are always problematic for some reason. It can be hard to get the measure over, and you're kind of adding millimeters, so you can't get a precise reading. So what I do in this case is use my box again, super convenient. This creates basically a 0 point that extends away from the pommel, so I can then place my measure here by the end of this, and then simply drag it along the side of the sword, so I have a precise measurement here. The next measurements you want to take are the width of the blade at the ricasso. This is also a pretty crucial measurement, because lots of times sword regulations give precise measurements for this area, so this is a good way to identify swords or their authenticity. So in this case we have, well, 2 centimeters at the ricasso. And you can even measure it depending on the sword, but you can take a few measurements, like one halfway up and one towards the tip, just to kind of measure how it tapers down towards the tip. The last measurements you want to take on the blade are the width of the blade at the ricasso. This is why you'll need calipers, because obviously a hardware store or a tailor tape measure aren't precise enough to pick up just a few millimeters. So you're going to want to measure again at the ricasso, and then if you want to measure the taper of the blade, you're going to take a few more measurements down the line. Now, if you really want to be precise and consistent, as let's say, if you want to be a bit data scientist about it, then you probably want to go to measure these at precise intervals. So all your swords you may measure at the ricasso, then 50 centimeters up, then 50 centimeters up, for instance, so that you have precise and matching measurements for all of your swords. I don't always do that. I actually don't do it ever, to be honest, but you could if you wanted to. So the next thing I do is take the weighing scale, and you want the scale that can recalibrate to 0 even when you put something on it. So you want something that doesn't just measure a 0, but you can put this on it and then calibrate it to 0, so it doesn't put your, well, in this case it's already calibrated now because I had already used it earlier. But yeah, you place this and then you put the sword onto the weighing scale. And in this case we have a reading of 560 grams. Normally I'll weigh it a couple of times just to make sure there wasn't anything misaligned, like that everything is correct, and then we can move forward. And that takes care of our hard data. Next, what I want to do is get the contextual data, so all data that can give me information on the history of this sword. So what I'll normally do is look for maker's marks. These are very often placed around the ricasso, on the spine. In this case, there's nothing though. And normally we also have them somewhere on the hilt, but again, in this case, there are none. And you want to look for all kinds of marks, for maker's marks, for regimental marks, for manufacturing marks, for proof marks, for etchings and engravings. Anything that can give you contextual information should be entered into your spreadsheet. Also, what I enter is, in the case of swords that I know the model of, you obviously enter the model and the country of provenance. And if you don't know the model, you can enter your speculative information. So you may assume that a certain sword, given its characteristics, is French or Prussian or English. So you can enter that speculative information as long as you mark it as speculation. So you can color code it or put it in brackets or whatever you want. But it's okay to add it. I do, because lots of times I then forget about certain things I thought about a specific sword, and I go back to it months later, and having recorded that information, oh wow, yeah, this is what I was thinking, and then I can kind of continue my research along those lines, or not. So you have your historical contextual information here. You can even add a column if you want with historical notes on the model of the sword, if you just want to have a very comprehensive spreadsheet. We then move on to the third category of this sword metadata, if you want. And this is what I call the transactional data. So this is all of the information about the purchase of the sword. So what I record here usually is the provenance in terms of purchase. So where did I buy it? Was it an auction house? Was it a dealer? Was it a marketplace? And I record specifically what auction house, what dealer, what marketplace. And if it's the case of a marketplace, I also try to record who the seller was or link to their profile, because I might want to blacklist them if I had a bad experience, or I might want to highlight them because I know they often have stuff I want to buy, or maybe they have good prices, who knows. So make sure you record that. The next thing you want to record is the price you paid, of course. This will give you a nice historical trend of your expenses, and unfortunately it will also be a sad reminder of how expensive this hobby can get. You'll then want to also record specific information about the transaction. So do they have is payment easy? Do they accept multiple payment systems? Were they being difficult about it and you could only use a specific credit card, for instance? Did delivery happen really soon after the purchase, or did you have to wait a month or two before they sent your item? Was it well packed? Was it not well packed? Was it insured? How much did delivery cost? Did they organize it, or did you have to? Did you have to pay any customs, or did it come from a country where you had to actually import the sword, or was it part of your, well, of the market you're in. So all of this information can be really useful because as you move on, you'll spot sellers you want to work with more and sellers you want to work with less, for instance. And in the case you sell swords, which, to be honest, I haven't yet because, yeah, I get very attached to them, although I'm going to have to start selling them soon, unfortunately. I can't fit them all in the house. But if you sell them, I also have a column that's for now is empty, but with the sold price. So that gives you a little bit of accounting too. So as I mentioned, the document is in the description. Download it, use it, feel free. And that was the process. So as you see, it took a little longer on video because I'm explaining things. When you're doing it on your own, it's really an issue of if you have, a measuring tape and you have a weighing scale and you have what you need to have, it's maybe 5 minutes per sword. And it's not time wasted, it's time invested. So ever since I've started cataloging my swords with more consistency, I've noticed many times I've been able to go back to my spreadsheet and extract information that I need in a pinch without having to remeasure my sword or without having to go through my old emails to figure out which auction house I bought it from or how much I paid for it or details about the markings or this kind of stuff. So cataloging your swords, just to close the video, is very important for yourself, for others, but it's also really, really going to save you a lot of time in your career as a collector. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.